A golfer's wife just blew up her husband's carefully managed public image, and I don't think she even realised she did it. This isn't a lifestyle interview gone sideways. It's not a glamour piece about life on the road. Maya Schauffele sat down for what she thought was a casual podcast chat about being married to a professional golfer. And somewhere in the middle of it, she used one sentence to describe how Xander talks about Scottie Scheffler at home. One sentence. That sentence has now passed through 47 players in the PGA Tour locker room. The commissioner's office got a call about it. Xander has not denied it, clarified it, or asked anyone to correct the record. I think that sentence tells you more about what it actually feels like to compete in Scheffler's era than anything either player has said in public, ever. So here's the question. Is what Maya said honest and overdue, or did she just hand the sport's most uncomfortable rivalry to every gossip outlet on the internet for the next 6 weeks? Drop it below. And if you want to know what that sentence actually was and what it means for everything happening between these two players right now, subscribe, because this one runs deep. Before we get to the sentence, you need to know what Xander Schauffele's 2024 looked like, because without that, you can't feel the weight of it. He won the Open Championship at Royal Troon. He won the PGA Championship at Valhalla. 2 majors, 1 year. Fewer than 10 players in the whole history of professional golf have done that. You want names? Nicklaus, Hogan, Player, Woods, that list. Schauffele belongs on it. And after all that, Scottie Scheffler was still the world number 1. Not because Scheffler won more majors in 2024, he won 1. Not because any serious golf analyst will tell you Scheffler had a better year on the courses that matter most. They wouldn't. But the world ranking doesn't run on majors. It runs on an algorithm. And that algorithm added up Scheffler's 9 wins, his accumulated points from 18 months of dominance, and spit out still number 1. Schauffele won more majors. Scheffler kept the ranking. Go sit with that for a second. Greg Norman won more tournaments than anyone in 1986. He had the ranking, he had the stats. He was, by almost every number available, the best player in the world that year. He just couldn't win at Augusta. And Nicklaus, at 46 years old, could. Norman kept chasing the ranking and the jacket didn't come. He spent the next decade carrying that weight around. People still bring it up when they talk about him. Not the wins, the near misses. Schauffele isn't Norman. His story isn't there yet, but the structure is the same. The guy with the bigger number next to his name isn't the guy whose 2024 you'd take if given the choice. And every sponsor, every broadcast team, every preview package continues to frame Schauffele as the player in Scheffler's shadow. That's the environment Maya Schauffele was living inside when she sat down for that podcast.
And when she described how her husband talks about Scottie at home,
the word that comes out isn't resentment, it isn't bitterness, it's something more precise than either of those. And it's the kind of specific thing that only gets said in private at a dinner table when the game face comes off and someone who loves you asks what you actually think. She said it in public. That's the whole problem. Xander Schauffele does not run his mouth. I want to be clear about that before we go any further, because it matters for what comes next. He's not Koepka, who will tell you exactly what he thinks about the guy in the next locker and then smile about it. He's not Rahm, who lets the emotion show in real time on the golf course. Schauffele is the player who gives you the precise, measured answer. The one where you can't quite find a clip to pull out of context. Journalists who cover him regularly say the same thing. He's not cold, he's just careful. Every word gets weighed before it leaves. So the fact that Maya spoke candidly about a subject she lives inside every day carries more weight than a direct quote from Xander ever would.
she didn't break the code on purpose. She just stopped filtering for a minute.
The podcast wasn't a golf media interview, it was a lifestyle show. The kind of conversation where the questions are softer and the guard tends to come down. Maya was talking about what it's like being married to someone chasing a goal as specific and as public as winning a major championship. And at some point, the host asked about Scheffler, the obvious comparison, the obvious name, the player everyone asks about when they're talking to anyone in Schauffele's orbit. And Maya said, he talks about Scottie the way you talk about someone who was born on third base. That's it. That's the line. You win 2 majors in 1 calendar year. Royal Troon and Valhalla, 2 of the most historic venues in the sport. You go home, you sit down with the person who has watched every round of your career from the closest possible seat, and you try to explain to her why the number still isn't moving. Why the ranking, the sponsorship positioning, the broadcast framing, the whole commercial infrastructure of the sport you just dominated at its biggest moments still treats you like you're chasing someone else's story. Try explaining that algorithm to your wife over dinner. Eventually, you stop explaining the algorithm, and whatever comes out next is the real thing, not the press conference version, the dinner table version. Born on third base. Now, to be absolutely clear about what that phrase does and does not mean, Scheffler was not handed anything. 9 wins in 1 season is not a gift. His consistency across the full schedule, his floor on weeks where his A game isn't there, that's genuinely earned. The phrase isn't calling Scheffler lucky. What it's describing is something more specific. It's the experience of competing against a player whose accumulated advantages have compounded to a point where individual season results can't bridge the gap quickly enough. The ranking points from 9 wins, the commercial infrastructure built on top of that ranking, the guaranteed signature event access, the sponsor positioning, the way broadcast teams frame every leaderboard Scheffler's name appears on, it all stacks. And the player on the outside of that stack, even after winning 2 majors in 12 months, is still adding from a smaller pile. That's what born on third base sounds like at a dinner table when the managed language is gone. You paid for a tour card. You worked the mini tours, the developmental circuit, the years of eating bad food in airports and fighting for cuts that pay just enough to keep going. You built a game that can win 2 majors in a year. You did all that. And the commercial story of professional golf continues to use your name as a supporting character in someone else's narrative. Not because you're worse, because the algorithm runs on a rolling 2-year window and the other guy had a head start. How does that feel? Really? Not the press conference version, the dinner table version. Maya told us. Is born on third base a fair description of Scheffler's structural advantages in professional golf right now? Or is it an unfair shot at a competitor whose dominance is just flat out earned and the ranking reflects reality? And the more loaded question, does Schauffele actually believe Scheffler is the better player? Or does he believe the system that keeps Scheffler at number 1 is a better operator than Scheffler is a golfer? Drop in the comments, I want to know where you land on this. I read every single one. What makes Maya's line travel through 47 locker rooms so fast isn't the drama of it, it's the accuracy. That's the part nobody's comfortable saying out loud.
Maya's comment didn't land in a vacuum. It hit a locker room that has been quietly processing a specific math problem for 2 years. The math problem is this. A player can win 2 majors in a single season and still not move to number 1 in the world. That's not hypothetical. It happened in 2024. The world ranking works on a rolling 2-year window. Wins generate points. High finishes generate points. The events you play generate points. But here's what most people don't think about. A player who wins 9 times in a single season doesn't just earn 9 wins worth of points. He earns 9 wins worth of points at the highest possible multipliers, in the highest value events, stacked at the front of the 2-year window where they decay the slowest. Scheffler's point total after 2024 wasn't just bigger than the second-ranked player's total, it was structurally different. built in a way that takes more than one great season to overcome. Schauffele won 2 majors. The gap barely moved. That is not a competitive failure. That is a system behaving exactly as designed. The world ranking made a quiet, unspoken promise to every player in professional golf. Perform, and the number reflects it. The number doesn't play favourites. It doesn't care about your agent, your sponsor relationships, or how many years you've been accumulating points before someone else shows up and breaks the scale in a single season. The number is honest. That promise is getting harder to keep with a straight face. Because when a player wins more majors in a calendar year than the world number 1 and still finishes the season ranked 2nd, the players watching that happen start to ask a simple question. What does the number actually measure? Here's the question nobody in the OWGR boardroom is answering cleanly. If the ranking system is supposed to reflect competitive excellence, and major championships are how this sport has always defined competitive excellence at its highest level, then why does a 2-major season not move a player to number 1? Is the algorithm measuring excellence, or is it measuring something more like competitive real estate? How many events you played, how many cuts you made, how consistently you collected points across the full distribution? Because those aren't the same thing. One is a measure of peaks, the other is a measure of volume. And the commercial infrastructure the tour builds on top of the ranking amplifies whichever thing it actually measures. Right now, it's amplifying volume. And every player outside the top position knows it. Now here's the part nobody is talking about. The world ranking isn't run by the PGA Tour. It's run by the official World Golf Ranking Board, a separate governance body that includes representatives from the major championships, the tours, and the governing bodies. The PGA Tour has a seat on that board. It has input into the algorithm structure, its weighting decisions, its revision cycles. The algorithm was last revised in 2022. The revision at that time specifically increased the points weighting for major championships because players had flagged that the original system underweighted peak performance relative to total volume. That revision was supposed to fix the gap. It didn't fully fix it, and in the 2 seasons since Scheffler's dominance made the remaining gap visible to everyone inside the sport, nobody on the OWGR board, including the PGA Tour's representative, has moved to revisit the weighting. They knew the fix was incomplete. They watched it play out in public. Nobody moved. So when Maya Schauffele says her husband talks about Scottie Scheffler the way you talk about someone born on 3rd base, she's not just describing Scheffler. She's describing a system that the PGA Tour sits on the governance board of, that it has not pushed to revise in 2 years, and that continues to produce an outcome where major championship performance doesn't move the number as far as peak excellence should. The tour has a seat at the table where the algorithm gets written. The algorithm produces a gap that every player ranked 2 through 15 can see and feel, and the tour hasn't used its seat to push for a revision since 2022. That's not a ranking problem, that's a choice. And it's the kind of choice that gets processed at dinner tables across the tour, until one of those tables has a microphone near it. The last person you'd expect to defend Scheffler's ranking in the middle of this conversation is Collin Morikawa. Not because Morikawa is contrarian, he isn't, but because he's a 2-time major champion who knows exactly what it feels like to perform at the highest level and watch the institutional positioning lag behind the competitive record. He has personal experience with the gap Maya is describing. Is born on 3rd base the most honest thing anyone in Schauffele's world has said about this situation? Or does it unfairly frame genuine competitive dominance as structural privilege? And here's the real question I want you to answer. If you were Xander Schauffele after 2024, would you be saying what Maya said at your dinner table, or would you genuinely believe the ranking is fair? Drop it below. Be honest with yourself on this one. Morikawa's red, and people familiar with his thinking have given me a sense of where he lands on this, is that born on third base misidentifies the problem. His argument is specific. Scheffler doesn't benefit from structural advantages in the ranking, he benefits from consistency. Not dominance at peaks, not even necessarily better major championship performances year over year. Consistency across the full distribution. Scheffler's bad weeks look like most players' good weeks, and a system that measures the full rolling 2-year window will always reward a high floor over a high ceiling. Morikawa isn't wrong. That's a real distinction, but being technically correct is cold comfort when the trophies don't match the number. Because here's where Morikawa's clean analytical read doesn't hold. Schauffele's floor is not low. He's not a peak-only player who disappears between majors. He's been inside the top 10 in the world consistently enough that the floor argument, the idea that what separates Scheffler from Schauffele is depth of performance across the full schedule, doesn't fully account for a 2-major gap that barely registers in the ranking. The gap isn't fully explained by consistency. Some of it is algorithm structure. And that matters because the players inside the system can feel the difference between a gap that reflects genuine competitive quality and a gap that reflects the math of a 2-year rolling window with a large head start baked in. Back in 2000, Tiger Woods put together a season that actually warranted the ranking gap between first and the rest of the field. 4 majors that season. The players chasing him weren't experiencing structural disadvantage. They were experiencing what it looks like when someone is genuinely, historically better. The ranking reflected reality so accurately that no one argued about it. That's not what's happening now. The players outside the top spot know how close they actually are. They watch Scheffler, they compete against him, they know where the gap is real and where it's accumulated mathematical weight from a head start. Knowing you're that close, without the number reflecting it, is a specific kind of thing. It doesn't come out at press conferences. It comes out at dinner tables. And then someone brings a microphone. The US Open is 6 weeks out. Schauffele goes in as the defending double major champion. Scheffler goes in as the world number 1. They'll be in the same media centre, same range, probably the same draw. And somewhere in the first pre-tournament press conference, a reporter is going to ask Xander Schauffele about that podcast. Phil Mickelson won the 2004 Masters. Tiger Woods was still the world number 1. Mickelson had just won his first major at 43 attempts. The pre-tournament narrative for the 2004 US Open was built almost entirely around the question of whether the ranking reflected reality. Whether a player who had just won at Augusta was genuinely second in the world to a player who had missed cuts that spring. That conversation dominated the press centre for 3 days. The tournament itself got almost secondary billing until the final round. Schauffele and Scheffler aren't Mickelson and Tiger. Different era, different players, different dynamic. But the structure of the pre-tournament media conversation is identical. Ranking gap, recent major performance that doesn't match it, a press corps that knows the gap is a story and is going to ask about it. The difference this time is that the question now has a specific hook. Not just the ranking doesn't reflect your 2024, which any player can answer with careful language about the algorithm and long-term competitive quality. The hook now is, your wife said you talk about Scheffler the way you talk about someone born on third base. Is that accurate? Try answering that one with algorithm language. Here's what the broadcast teams are deciding right now in their US Open production meetings. Do they build the Scheffler-Schauffele storyline around the competitive record, 2 majors versus sustained dominance, peak versus consistency? Or do they build it around what Maya said? Because those are genuinely different shows. One is a golf preview. The other is a story about what competitive excellence costs a person when the number doesn't match the trophies. And I know which one keeps people watching past the second hole. Pull back from Maya, pull back from the algorithm and the OWGR board and Morikawa's flaw argument. Look at what's actually happening here. Professional golf sells two things at once. It sells excellence, the idea that you are watching the best players in the world perform at the highest level of the game. And it sells fairness, the idea that the system around those players is honest, that the number reflects the performance, that there's no structural gap between what you earn on the course and what the sport gives you back. Both of those things have to be true for the commercial promise of professional golf to hold. Right now, one of them is getting harder to defend. You've been watching Xander Schauffele for 2 years. You saw Royal Troon, you saw Valhalla. You know what a player looks like when he's genuinely performing at the top of the sport. And you've watched the broadcast framing, the sponsor positioning, the way the whole commercial infrastructure of professional golf continues to treat him as the number 2 story. You know the trophies don't match the positioning. You can feel it when you watch. Maya Schauffele feels it at the dinner table, and 47 players in the locker room felt it the moment they heard what she said. The ranking isn't honest enough right now, and everyone on the inside of the sport can see it except the governance structure that runs the algorithm. The ranking measures what it was built to measure. It just wasn't built for this specific situation. This isn't a Scheffler problem. He competes at a level that justifies the ranking by the system's own math. This is a system problem, specifically whether a rolling 2-year window built for a different era of professional golf is the right tool for a sport where one player can accumulate enough volume in a single stretch to make peak excellence seasons by other players functionally invisible in the number. 2 majors in 2024, still number 2. Still the supporting character in the broadcast framing of his own sport. That gap between what the algorithm produces and what the competitive record shows is what Maya described at a dinner table, and the OWGR board, which includes the PGA Tour's own representative, has not moved to address it in 2 full years of watching the gap be visible. Should the world ranking system weight major championships more heavily? Because what Schauffele did in 2024 should move the number and doesn't? Or is the current algorithm an accurate reflection of competitive quality over the full body of evidence? Drop your answer right now. And tell me honestly, does Scheffler's number 1 ranking feel earned to you, or does it feel like math? Because there's a difference. You know which one it is, and so does Maya. The number says one thing. The trophy case says something else. And at the dinner table, where the careful language finally stops, the gap between those 2 things sounds like born on third base. Here's what's coming. Schauffele sits down at the US Open pre-tournament press conference. A reporter asks him about the podcast. Not about his game, not about course prep, about what his wife said. On camera, in front of the whole infrastructure. His answer will be measured. That's who Xander Schauffele is. But Maya's sentence is already in every room he walks into. It was in the room the second the recording circulated. It'll be on the first tee if he and Scheffler get paired together. It'll be in the booth when the broadcast team sets up the head-to-head graphic. You can't walk back a dinner table truth once the recording gets out. Not when 47 people have already heard it. Not when it names something the whole tour quietly agrees with, but nobody wanted to be the one to say first. Maya said it. The US Open is going to make everyone deal with it. If you want to know how Scheffler responds to being described that way, not in a statement, not in a press conference, but in the way that competitive people respond when someone says the quiet part out loud about them, subscribe. That response is coming. And it's going to tell you something real about both of them. The dinner table started it. The US Open finishes it.